Mornings with Stephen Jardine on BBC Radio Scotland.
Now, picture the scene. The school bell goes, your child or grandchild grabs their bag and coat, they run for the door and get to the front gate, and who is waiting to collect them? My next guest believes it should always be the mother and that companies should start offering flexible working hours to allow this to happen. Are you a front gate mum who's always there, or do you think it doesn't matter who picks up at the school gates, or even for kids to make their own way home? Let us know, 80295 to text us this morning. Let's speak to Christine Armstrong, businesswoman and author of the book Power Mums. Christine, thanks for your time this morning.
That's all right.
Why should mums always pick up kids?
Let's step back for a second on this, because as all good politicians would say, that's slightly out of context. 4 or 5 years ago, I had a full-time job in a big consultancy and 2 small children, and I was utterly miserable and finding it really difficult to cope. So I thought I'd go and interview some women who had big jobs and children and see how they did it and kind of learn what I was clearly doing wrong. And I thought if I wrote about that, then other people could maybe I could share that wisdom and experience, and that would help other people. And I was particularly interested in the fact that we talk a lot about females in senior roles in the UK, chief exec boards and so on. And actually 4 out of 5 women in the UK still have a baby by the time they're 45, or a child by the time they're 45. And women with teenage children, the Roundtree Foundation tells us, tend to earn 33% less than their male peers. So I wanted to understand those challenges. And I also became interested in what made some of the women who are doing those jobs with children seem really happy and relaxed and seem to be getting on with it well, and some people who seem to be really struggling. And one of the factors seems to be that women who are really well connected socially in their local area, not in work, not in business circles, but in their neighbours, their friends, their family, the school and so on, seem on the whole to be happier and more relaxed than those who are never able to get to the school gate. So it's not a blanket, always. It's my observation is that women who are able to get to the school gates once, twice, 3 times a week just seem to be a bit more engaged and feel a bit more relaxed and happier than those mums who are never able to get there because of work.
What's wrong with dads doing it?
There's nothing at all wrong with dads doing it, and my husband does a school run a lot. One of the observations, though, that I get from the mums, and it's just something to be aware of, it may not matter to you at all, but dads say this as well, is that at the school gate, women often exchange a lot of information. And some of that information is quite sort of like, there's a swimming club opening, there's a test next week, this is going on. And dads tend to call that gossip. And a lot of the dads I talked to, I interviewed a dad yesterday who said, the school run for me, I've done a good job if I turn up on time, pick up the kids, they've got their stuff and I get them home. And then I get home and I think, oh no, my wife's going to ask me, what did everyone say at the gate? What was going on? And I'll have forgotten to have that conversation because I'm not very interested.
Oh, hang on. Aren't we just perpetuating sexist stereotypes here? Men are perfectly capable of having these conversations at the school gate, Christine.
They are absolutely capable. But what I hear again and again from women that I interview, and I do worry actually about the stereotypes thing a lot, is that because quite a lot of men don't enjoy those conversations or don't want to have them or have them with men, which is entirely their choice, that sometimes women then get frustrated that they're not getting the information they might want to have. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So one mum told me that she was working full time. Her husband was much more based at home. And she found out later that all of the kids in the class that her kids were in were being tutored to get into a particular secondary school. And she just hadn't realised that was happening. And she felt that her kids had been disadvantaged as a result. Another mum told me that her daughter had done really unexpectedly badly in a set of tests at school. When she'd gone in to see the teacher, it became clear that everyone else had known this test was happening and they'd been helping their kids. And she just hadn't known because her partner hadn't had those conversations. So it's in no way dads can't have these conversations. Of course they can. It may not just be part of, how men are often comfortable behaving.
But what you seem to be saying is men aren't interested in what's happening with their kids at school, which simply isn't true.
No, that's not true. That's definitely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, so I'll just quote you what men say. So this isn't me imposing.
Oh, so you've asked men. So this isn't women's view of men. You have asked men.
No, I've interviewed dads. Yeah, I've interviewed a lot of dads. I've interviewed 4 or 5 dads this week, actually, because I'm focused on dads at the moment. But what the dads tell me is, I know it sounds terribly stereotypical. It kind of troubles me that it does. But one dad said to me yesterday, look, it sounds terrible, Christine, but honestly, I'd rather talk about the football. And I know that's a terrible stereotype. But it's not that he's not interested. It's just that it's not in his instincts to go and have those sort of chats like, did you know there was a bloke in the park taking photographs yesterday, and, you need to watch out. And women seem to just, for some reason, share that information more easily. Maybe it's social conditioning. I don't know, but that's a lot of what I hear.
All right. So taking this argument forward, how can the workplace adapt? Because the problem is that school pickup coincides with about exactly halfway through the working afternoon. So how can the workplace adapt to make it easier for working mums to be there at the school gates if we accept that is a good thing moving forward?
Well, I don't think it's all about pickup, because I think there's drop-off as well. So I don't distinguish between the two. I think it's just about being connected. And so for quite a few people that I know are able to do the drop-off in the morning and maybe get to work a little bit later, and that can work for them. I think we also have to look at this sort of myth around flexible working, which people talk about a lot, and seems in many cases to mean you work a full solid day in the office around kind of traditional hours, and then it just means that you're online all evening and all weekend as well. And actually, that's not good for anybody's life, whether you've got kids or not, whether you're a mum, you're a dad. So I think we just have to be more frank about people wanting to have a balanced life. We have to not think about the leadership positions in work requiring everyone to work a 70-hour week. In order that we can drive change and have, more gender equality at work and more people engaged positively in the workforce, and perhaps, get somewhere towards equality before the 2186 date that the World Economic Forum gave us last week.
That's fine, but if you're, say, a nurse or you are a police officer, you simply can't break off at 3:30 to go and pick up the kids. So isn't there a danger with this that you produce a kind of two-tier parenting of those virtuous mums who can make it to the school gates and those who've got jobs that simply can't accommodate that?
Well, I actually also involved in the maternity services committee at UCLH, one of the big London hospitals. So I know quite a lot about midwives and midwife schedules and how they organise time. And actually, for midwives, they do work huge shifts, and it would be very difficult if they're on a shift to be able to do the school run properly at either end. But they also have days when they're not on shift, when they can do it. And I'm not saying in any way that this is something you have to do every day. It may be something you can realistically manage once or twice a week. But it may just help you feel more connected and engaged in your local network. It may be that you can never do it, in which case you might want to think about other ways you could be more engaged locally, how you connect with friends and other mums or other parents locally. And there may be other ways for you to do it. But it certainly isn't an instruction to anyone. It's simply an observation about what seems to work for people.
Because there's a lot of guilt out there already, Christine, isn't there? We're all trying to be the best parents we possibly can. And the suggestion that some are doing better than others if they make it to the school gates isn't really helping with that, is it?
Well, actually, the perspective I'm coming from on this is slightly different, which is what makes, if we think about the number of women that reach senior leadership levels at work and how those people who are in a position to drive change within business, who are able to make the changes and who understand how difficult it is for women with children, mums with children and dads with children to be able to do full-time jobs and work, the more of those people we have in senior positions, I think the better. And so I think that their mental health and their welfare, how well they feel on that journey, is critical, because otherwise, as we know from the data, they drop out, and that's in nobody's interest.
So could the key for this? No, I was just going to say, Christine, could the key for this be more women in senior positions in business who would have gone through this process and gone through the pressure of school pick-up and drop-off, recognise and be more receptive to what you're talking about?
Absolutely. That's what I would love. I mean, I want more women to be able to thrive during their working career so that they get to a leadership position and they understand the pressures that other people are under and can help, make the changes that will make this work better for everybody.
So you think that for some mums who've got high pressured jobs, the pressure of this stuff around school, the drop off and the pick up and what is maybe being missed, can lead some of them to just step back and walk away from it?
Yeah. I do. I think sometimes they can feel quite socially isolated because these tend to be people, a lot of the women I interview worked for 10, 12 years and then they have a baby. And so they've got great social connections in town. They know lots of people. They kind of got a professional life. And then they go back to the suburb that they live in, which they often weren't born in. They may not have school friends in, and they have a baby. And they find that quite difficult. They may not know a lot about babies. They may not have been involved with many children. They find it quite challenging. And they don't have a social network. One woman I spoke to, was a partner, a big consultancy, told me that she went from not noticing the family that ran the shop on the corner of her street to going going there with a crying baby because she didn't have any friends, and the grandmother would rock her baby and calm her down for her. So I think what I'm observing here is that if you don't take the time to build those social support networks and friends locally, it can be much harder to continue those big professional jobs, because at the end of Friday night, you've done a big week in the office, you come home and you haven't got friends necessarily to go out with. On Saturday morning, you don't know which other mums to meet at the park, to hang out with, to do play dates with, and it just makes it a lot harder.
What difference has it made for you? You've tried to be there more for pick up and drop off. How has it made a difference to your relationship with your kids, but also your attitude to work, I guess?
So I left my big consultancy. So I was one of those women who basically gave up and said, I just don't know how to make this work. And I, kind of wish that I knew now what I knew then. I think perhaps I would be able to do a better job of it. I don't know. So I took some time out, and then I set up my own business so that I could work totally flexibly, which, as we know, a lot of women do. And we allow everybody in the business to work completely flexibly. So that means that I do drop off most days. I probably do pick up once, maybe twice a week, depending on how the week's going and what's possible. And I feel just much more connected into school. I know much more about what my kids are doing. I know much more about what's going on locally. And I think, honestly, that makes me a little bit saner and much calmer. So it works for me, but I've kind of followed the advice that I've been given, and I have seen a benefit from it.
Okay, well, you've stirred up a bit of a hornet's nest here, as I'm sure you probably you would. Gail on the text says, my husband picks our daughter up. I'm fully aware of what's happening at our girls' school. If a woman missed a school test because it was only mentioned in the playground, that's not her husband's fault. Every parent needs to make an effort to find out what's happening, and that doesn't have to happen at the school gate. Live to Wilma, who's in Troon this morning and called us. Morning, Wilma.
Hi, how are you, Stephen?
I'm fine. How are you?
Not feeling too good about the very idea that people will get time to disappear from work to go and pick up their children from school.
Why not?
I work for the NHS. I've worked for the NHS for 35 years now, and I think that the NHS provide quite flexible working, up to an extent certainly, for their workers. We have flexible working, we have self-rostering, we have parental leave, we have carers leave, we have emergency leave when things happen, when kiddies are unwell, which I completely understand that the parents have to stay at home. But the very idea that I'm trying to run a service within the NHS and somebody can say to me, I need to go away at 2:30 to pick up my kid from the school is just ridiculous.
Right, well, hang on a second. Go on, carry on.
What happens when somebody is off on special leave or parental leave, we don't get a replacement. So it's up to all the other workers to pick up the slack.
Okay, here's Moira has texted us. Interesting discussion. I agree with Christine. It was important for my sanity as a latchkey kid myself to be at the school gates. I negotiated flexible working with my employer to use my lunch hour to do the school run, then work at home for an hour. But you're saying, Wilma, that in some workplaces, like the NHS, that just wouldn't work.
No, it wouldn't work, particularly when you're a frontline worker, right at the coalface, when it's emergency services like maternity. That lady pointed out the UCLH in London that she's engaging the midwives here. It wouldn't work. Babies don't work to a timetable. Operations on somebody who comes in as a result of a road accident, we don't work to a timetable. And if somebody is needed as a health service worker to work at that point, you can't guarantee that you're going to let them go away at 2:30 to pick up wee Johnny or whatever.
Christine, come back in on this. You've been listening to Wilma there, and it's a great theory perhaps, but practically impossible.
Well, I think if you make the assumption that you have to do it day in, day out, every day, that everybody has to be at the gate at 3:00, then it becomes bonkers. But I think if you say, could we design a working week? Could we design a shift pattern? Could we design it in an ordered way that's fair to people whether they have kids or not? That means that on some occasions during the week that parents of, men, women, whatever, can go and pick up the children. I don't generally think that is beyond the wit of our capabilities. So I think the assumption that it has to be every single occasion is taking
it's a work-life balance.
For everybody.
Balance. You balance your life around your work, because I'm sorry, as far as I'm concerned, if you turn up at the cash machine on the fourth Thursday of every month to take your salary, you have an obligation to carry out your duties within the NHS, and the NHS will try and make your life as good as possible so that you can continue to work and see to your family. But the rest of the workers shouldn't be picking it up all the time. That's what I'm saying. And if you are good at organising your life, you should be able to say, well, on these days, I will be taking and picking up from school, and the other days it will fall to another parent or another carer. I think
we're in vehement agreement. I absolutely agree with that. I think that's
ridiculous.
Completely reasonable.
Ridiculous suggestion. And if you've been engaging with the midwives down in UCLH down in Lundy, you'll know exactly what their staffing issues are.
Well,
they find it impossible to staff the place without adding to the burden, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, Wilma,
sorry if I sound like Mrs. Angry, but it's just kind of...
Angry from Troon. Wilma, thank you very much indeed for calling us. We're going to talk to Katie Duncan, a mum, about how she practically does all of this and her view on that. And Sarah Clark, a child psychotherapist. And Christine Armstrong, you stay with us as well. I'd love your text on this, 80295. They're coming in thick and fast. What about working dads don't need to pick up children? And so by mum, did your contributor mean a parent, or is my gender the problem? We'll come back and talk about more of that in just a second. 10:22. It's Thursday morning. It's BBC Radio Scotland.